After 2.5 years from its initial reveal, we have finally gotten our first glimpse at the One Piece Remake by Wit Studio. And it looks good? Question mark? Look, there's only so much I can glean from 40 seconds of actual genuine footage, and I did tell myself that I wouldn't make another pre-release video about Wit Piece unless I actually had something noteworthy to say. But goddamn, I have some noteworthy things to say, man. And I'm basically a glorified One Piece channel at this point anyways, so screw it. Let's dive right into this trailer for my most anticipated anime and talk about the good, talk about the questionable, and talk about the concerning. We'll start positive here. This video is largely going to be about my concerns, but I don't want to sound too negative because the best thing that you can say about what we've seen so far for the One Piece remake is that it does look good. Even just at a glance, even with these split-second cuts all over the place, you can tell this is a competent production made by competent people. I don't think anyone should have ever expected any less, if I'm being honest. When you get a studio like Wit and a team like the Attack on Titan staff, you are essentially guaranteed a certain floor of quality that will still be higher than most anime could ever dream of having. And from what we're seeing, there is a lot to be excited about with this staff and with this production. Seeing East Blue in this modern production lens is exciting. Hearing a brand new Yuki Hayashi soundtrack for One Piece is exciting. This is a fantastic team, and even some of the more divisive aspects like the CGI, I do think will ultimately be for the better. I mean, come on, this is the Attack on Titan team. It was always going to have CGI, and no matter what it might look like from these brief glimpses, I do believe that the CGI will be up to that Attack on Titan caliber and elevate the production in an interesting way. Ultimately, even in the worst case scenario, I don't think anyone has to worry about Wit Piece looking bad. That being said, I'm not in love with the way the series looks at the moment, and I want to try to explain why without sounding like an ungrateful prick who doesn't appreciate the work that the staff are doing. I do appreciate everything that is going into this project. I appreciate it so much that I somehow made a 40-minute video about a dozen PNGs and the staff monologuing. But in that video, almost 2 years ago at this point, I end everything with the culmination of what I thought was the most important thing for the One Piece remake to have. And I said this staff need to have a vision for this project. It can't just be a Netflix cash grab to make the live action more popular. It can't be a checklist of the manga with no creative liberties taken. It can't be an aesthetic replication of what Toei has already done. It needs its own flourishes, it needs its own moments, it needs its own aesthetic, and it really does need its own vision. And I think the issue that I'm having now, finally having watched the first piece of footage for this brand new One Piece series, is that I'm not exactly seeing the new vision here. Not yet, at least. If you told me that this trailer was for a new East Blue special from Toei Animation, I would 100% believe you. It looks almost exactly like those episode of specials from years ago, which is pretty much the only thing that I was hoping it wouldn't look like. In a world where Toei themselves have captured so many different versions of Oda's style on screen, both near identical resemblances and these very extreme experimental approaches, I was really praying and hoping that Wit Studio's take would be more unique and interesting. Something to set it apart from the decades of content that One Piece already has. But how do you do that, I hear you ask? If this is an adaptation of the manga author Eiichiro Oda, you naturally want to capture his style, and that's something that Toei has already been doing for the past 30 years. Trying too hard to differentiate yourself might end up with a result that doesn't look like One Piece at all. And you're not wrong, but I don't think imitating Oda's artwork is the only way to capture the spirit of his drawings. Oda himself told the staff during pre-production for this series that he wanted them to remake it in their own style, instead of just faithfully reproducing what's already on the page. To give you an example of this, look at One Piece fan letter. Look at the designs and drawings of Keisuke Mori. This is arguably the best character designer that the One Piece anime has ever had. And he's not trying to copy Oda's artwork. This is all very much the beautiful, trademarked, iconic Mori style of drawing, but it still has that One Piece spirit. The way the characters are drawn still evokes Oda's artwork to me, just in a different and fresh way. Tsushio's work on One Piece Movie 6, Hanabushi's work on the 3-day 2-year special, even animation directors like Naoki Tate's work on the main series, Oda's core designs are delightfully simple in a way where you really can experiment with them in many different ways and still capture those same vibes. The designs lend themselves to being interpreted in different styles, which is what makes it all the more disappointing that the designs and aesthetic that we got really don't feel any different or special compared to what Toei has already done. And it doesn't even have to be in the designs themselves. There's plenty of ways to still distinguish the aesthetic of this series while going for this ultra-polished, ultra-Oda-like artwork. And that's kind of what I figured the series would do when we were looking at the concept art for the One Piece remake. Let's rewind a few years back to that first showing of One Piece. We didn't see much, but we did see design sketches and we did see image boards. And there were certain things that I think a lot of people were extrapolating from those two things, including me. On one hand, you had these design sketches that looked like a weird, interesting mix of Oda's current style of drawing with pre-time skip flourishes like Nami's big, pupilless eyes. They felt a bit too modern for me, but I still really liked them, and I especially liked the effort to keep some of the design language of early Oda artwork. On the other hand, you had these absolutely gorgeous image boards that showed an aesthetic that was genuinely unlike anything that we've ever seen from One Piece before. A watercolor-like approach that felt like it was embracing the way that Oda himself colors the spreads and volume covers of the manga. I cannot stress enough here, all of the excitement for the One Piece remake visuals, for me, were rooted in these concept arts. They felt so fresh and so alive, and most importantly, they evoked those strong feelings of early One Piece. Luffy and Nami running through this dark alleyway from the villagers after they've taken down Buggy, the warm interior of a dinnertime Baratier as Sanji beats the shit out of this arrogant patron, the dawn breaking as the crew prepare to take on Kuro's crew outside of Syrup Village. These are all insanely striking images that capture the feeling of East Blue in a way that we've never seen captured before. And that's ultimately what sucks about it, is that the One Piece remake doesn't look anything like these original concept boards that we've been looking at for the past 2 years. Hell, the characters themselves have undergone changes from those original showings. No more pre-time skip flourishes, no more beautiful brown Nami eyes. It seems like what they've done is they've watered down all of the interesting aesthetic decisions in an attempt to homogenize it with the aesthetic that most fans feel comfortable looking at now. And before you say anything, did I expect the entire series to be a watercolor painting? No. Did I think pre-release material wouldn't change at all over the course of 2 years of planning and production? No. I'm not stupid, okay? I know these things happen when you're making projects as big as this, but I've also seen a lot of people who have a bizarre idea of what concept art and image boards like this are actually for. Like, you don't just make this stuff for shits and giggles, okay? Art and boards like this are used to conceptualize the project. That's why they're called concept art. On some level, concept art is meant to be a guide for what the creators want the final product to look like and what they want it to evoke. Especially in a case like this where we're adapting content that not only already exists, but has already been adapted in other forms multiple times. They don't draw this because they need to know what Zoro versus Buggy or Usopp versus Kuro are going to look like, because they already know what they're going to look like. These kinds of concepts should only exist to show them and show us what their interpretation is going to be. Instead, we have a final product that looks completely irrelevant to those original concepts. The color design and art direction is much simpler and less striking, the designs are rounder and more modern, and the overall vibe that's being evoked is less revisiting East Blue with a new perspective, and more revisiting East Blue with a perspective that you've already seen. Look at a remake like last year's Samurai Legend Yaiba, a series also done by Wit Studio, albeit a completely different team within. Now, the show had its problems. God damn did it have its problems. But the more you watch this series, the more I think you'll understand how important it is to have a team with a clear, distinct, ambitious vision. This is visually everything I could possibly want from a remake like the One Piece. You have the beautiful Yoshimichi Kamada designs that feel both delightfully retro and modern all at the same time, mixed into a lavish production that gets literally everything right. The Sakuga highlights, the gorgeous color scripts, the artistically driven background work. There's even a watercolor touch to the aesthetic, including every single character's eyes. This is a miracle production that admittedly was never in the cards for the One Piece remake, but I do think it shows a good example of aspects that I, and many others, were hoping to see from Wit Studios' take on One Piece. So all of that being said, let's circle back to being positive, okay? Am I dooming on this entire project before they even have the chance to release a single episode? No, of course not. Again, these are concerns based off of a trailer, but they're absolutely not criticisms or condemnations. Not yet. I've seen 40 seconds of a total 5-hour season that could very well still undergo changes even now before it drops on Netflix next year. So I want to talk hopes here. Copium, if you will, about ways this adaptation can still set itself apart and be worth watching even as someone who had these previous expectations. There's already some underappreciated aspects that I do think will end up making a big difference. A brand new Yuki Hayashi soundtrack? No matter how good it turns out, that alone will already make this One Piece feel significantly different to Kohei Tanaka's work on the rest of the core franchise. And we've already heard a bit of it, and it does sound great, as you would hope from him. Another aspect, like I mentioned earlier, is the extensive use of CGI. Despite having a really robust CGI department at Toei Animation, they really don't use it in One Piece as often as you would expect. Now that can be a very good thing, of course, especially when they don't rely on CGI for things that most other studios would. But I think one of the key defining aesthetic traits of this new One Piece series will be its use of CGI, and the different visual approach that lends itself to. I'm not in love with all of the CGI that's in the trailer, but there's undeniably a sense of scale and context to the world that will be greatly enhanced by Wit Studios' competent CGI team. And they've already made it clear that it is an artistic decision on their part. It's not something that they're using to mask a lack of animation or talent. If they can capture even half of the sauce that Attack on Titan had in some of its more insane CGI-driven sequences, I think it's really going to be a spectacle no matter what people are saying now. But the biggest thing by far that will set this adaptation apart, no matter how it looks, no matter how it sounds, is the pacing. This is why you make a One Piece remake, because Toei's One Piece can be slow, and that slowness is very amusing when you compare it to an average chapter of the One Piece manga. I don't think people really appreciate this aspect of the manga because of Toei's anime, but it is generally a very fast-paced series. Yeah, in the bigger picture, there's parts of arcs that go on a little long, but on a chapter-by-chapter basis, Oda generally tries to keep a very fast tempo to everything that's going on. By that metric alone, it'll be refreshing to see an adaptation that does have a relatively brisk pace without being, an absolute rushed shit show like the Fishman Island remaster or the episode of recap specials. Ultimately, beyond anything that I say here, I think it's important to realize that the One Piece remake really isn't being made for people like me. People who grew up with One Piece, people who have watched the anime, read the manga, consumed the games and tertiary material. This isn't for us. We can still be there, we can still appreciate everything that's going into it, or have our own problems with the way it's handled, but the director himself has said that the biggest thing that he wants is to let the kids of today, a new audience, feel the same way that he did in high school reading One Piece as it released. To that end, it doesn't really matter if it looks like Toei's anime. It doesn't matter if it sets itself apart or not. The reality is that this is going to be a new gateway into this wonderful series, and that alone will make it the defining experience for many, many people. But that leads me into my biggest concern of all. Beyond the production, beyond the pacing, beyond anything actually surrounding this season, my biggest concern is that this new audience who will enter the world of One Piece with this remake won't even be able to see the story beyond its first few arcs. It has been confirmed that Mayumi Tanaka, the current voice actress for Luffy, the one who has been voicing him for the past 27 years, will be voicing him in this new Wit Studio remake. And that is a bad goddamn idea. I said this in my Wit Piece video from a few years back. If this project had any foresight, if it had any sense of longevity at all, we needed a new voice cast for these characters. Does it hurt saying goodbye? Yeah. Will it be weird hearing new ones? Yeah. But Mayumi Tanaka is 71 years old, man. She will be retired before we even have the chance to reach Water 7. This was a chance to start completely fresh, and they completely blew it, in a way that truly makes me wonder if they even intended this remake to go that far to begin with. If Wit Piece doesn't make it to those later arcs, a lot of the copium and defenses that I've made in this video will become completely obsolete. That fresh gateway into the series becomes no different than the same kind of teaser for the manga that the One Piece movies are. The potential of fixed pacing that does justice to the source material doesn't even get to the arcs that actually need that fixing to begin with. I cannot stress enough here, if this remake only does East Blue, even if it gets to Alabasta or Skypiea, I truly do not know who this is for or why it was made. A remake like this is only appealing if we can go the mile and remake the arcs that actually needed remaking to begin with. And if there's any bright spot that's come out of this, it has been people going back to those early episodes of One Piece, comparing it to this remake, and realizing that Toei's adaptation has always been really good. Is it slow at times? Sure. Is the animation kind of limited? Yeah. But Toei's anime is still undeniably a good adaptation that gets the important things right. The art and designs and voice acting and emotional moments, they're all handled with a supreme care and a vision. This is the series that made me fall in love with anime to begin with, and I really do think the anime, and especially those pre-HD arcs, hold up very, very well. It's only when we get to around Annie's Lobby and beyond where I think a remake actually makes sense. The pacing does get bad. The animation does get bad. I want to see Dressrosa with beautiful animation, or Whole Cake Island with good pacing. It's exciting, it really is, but at this point, I don't know if that's ever even going to happen. So to end this video on a realistic but positive note, I want to reiterate that I am still very much looking forward to the One Piece remake. It may not go as far as I like, it may not look as unique or fresh as I was hoping, but there is still undoubtedly years of many people's hard work and time and passion going into this project, and beyond my own excitement, beyond the hype of seeing a new take on Zoro vs. Mihawk, or crying my eyes out yet again at Arlong Park, I think the biggest thing that I can say is that if this remake gets even one more person into One Piece, into this grand story and adventure, the same one that got me into this entire medium back in high school, I think that's really cool. And if that happens, I'll still be happy that it was made. I will most likely be seeing you guys next February, where I will be talking about the new series in immense detail, so subscribe for then, subscribe for any videos that I make in between, join the Discord server in the description if you want to chat with me or other One Piece fans further. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.